This is Whitley Strieber, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
On a starry night, when everything is right. Oh, time gone by. All the times we got high. We could have seen the future, but there was always some kind of bond. Can you look me in the eye? Yeah, or can you tell me you always get on by? Sing me a song that burns like a flaming torch. We're all gonna get by.
We're going to talk about absolutely nothing.
My favorite subject.
Right. So we're doing it right now, and it's recording. But I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't the worst show ever.
Very doubtful, sir.
Okay. How can we make that? I mean, it would be hard to be the worst show ever, but I've actually heard probably one or two that were in the top 10.
Nope, Bradley and I did one yesterday in which the audience tricked him into saying the N-word repeatedly.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Nope.
Yesterday?
He's like 57 years old and he's British, and so was it live?
Oh yeah. I had to explain myself to Facebook.
Seriously?
Very seriously.
So what happens when you go there and do that, and then what happens with Facebook?
Well, I had to explain to them that basically he's foreign. He didn't know that that N-word toes is not a bad word. He read it all as one word. He didn't separate the N-word from the toes.
I would just stay away from it completely, though.
He didn't catch it.
These are holiday treats. They are Brazilian nuts.
Yeah, Brazil nuts. Thank you. I was trying to remember.
I don't even go there. I mean,
and therefore they had a very old-fashioned and very unpleasant name.
It's a respect thing, though, you know.
Exactly. The audience member knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
So, and he was just drunk enough not to catch it.
So that's another, because we're talking about our good friend Bradley Powers that you can harass now. He's on Facebook. He's a very unique individual. I remember I was trying to get a hold of him. I'd been on his show, or he had been on mine, whatever, and I was trying to get a hold of him. And excuse me, and he wasn't answering any requests, any emails, nothing. And it was like for a week and a half. And I contacted Cass, who at the time I didn't know very well. And Cass contacted me in a couple of days. I got a hold of Bradley. And I said, "Oh, good. Is he okay?" Because I thought he was dead. And he goes, "Yeah, he had to leave his apartment because there was a demon in there that he had to get rid of." So
Not joking, folks.
That's my indoctrination into that world that above and beyond. I don't even. It exists somehow, somewhere, everywhere, I assume. But with Bradley, it's he's a necromancer. What else?
A druid, a hierophant in training, a psychic. His words are binding, et cetera, et cetera.
He believes that he is Merlin reincarnate.
Right.
No. That's my theory. Actually, he tries to distance himself from that.
I've seen him use a lot of Merlin stuff on his.
Oh yeah.
His posts.
Yeah. But it's a vicious rumor that he is claiming to be a Merlin incarnate. That's not it. He claims to be being trained by Merlin in spirit form, which is not uncommon in the shamanistic world. But
the British shaman.
Basically, yeah. Stranger things have happened.
He's super interesting, though. I'm an Anglophile, so I love everything British, and it's not a secret. I want to move to London, and I have wanted to. I haven't moved, but I would love to, and I love it. It's love the food, love the culture, love the history. 100%. I am a descendant of King Edward I, and
really,
yes, I am, and it's documented. There's a book called "The Loomises," the male Loomises of America, and my mom was a Loomis, so I'm a direct descendant, and it talks specifically in the book about my 16th great grandmother, and it stops at my great grandfather.
Interesting.
So yeah. So it's really interesting, and that was Ancestry.com. So I stumbled upon that. So here's another thing. So I went to Westminster Abbey, and was taking a vicar's tour, which is kind of behind the scenes tour of Westminster Abbey, and it's incredible. In a 15-day period, I probably was in Westminster Abbey 7 or 8 times. You could take the tour, which was, it was like $50. And then, of course, they have free organ recitals, and they got these big banging pipe organs up there that are huge. They have services. You can go to those. They have, and not only that, you can go to these services, and you don't know who's going to, what royalty or whoever is going to show up. And they did, and they have this section for them. Obviously, these were, kids and whoever. It wasn't like the Duke and Duchess. It wasn't, that was prior to the Duke and Duchess, before they were who they are. But literally, they're part of the royal family was there. And yeah, so King Edward I has a tomb right there by the tomb of Edward the Confessor. And you walk up these stairs, and the tomb itself is exposed on 2 sides as you walk up the stairs. And over the years, what was kind of a tradition when traveling monks would come to Westminster Abbey, they would take souvenirs. So being that they all went to the tomb of Edward the Confessor, and the lesser kings are kind of scattered here and around Westminster Abbey, they would take a knife. They always would have a knife. Any good monk would have a knife back then. True. It was 1,000 years ago. And they would just basically pop some sort of ornament off the tomb, whatever was there, which now the tomb of Longshanks, Edward I, is missing all the ornaments that that adorn the tomb. There's nothing there. It looks like a stone box, a really rough stone box. You can see the patterns and where the stuff was, but they popped everything off there, which is
right.
Quite remarkable. So literally before I went there, I stumbled upon, my family tree, and so it's really hard to do. I know I'm kind of going off topic here because we're talking about shaman or whatever, but you have to find, there's some good clues in there to lead you in the right direction. And Ancestry.com is a remarkable site. It's a little bit expensive if you want to get into that deep, but, I thought, well, I know who my 16th great-grandmother is, so I need to find this pathway, because it was the Loomises that the book was about. Wasn't about the royalty. So here came my great-grandmother, 16th great-grandmother, and then, of course, it went off a different jag because it went up the royal line is where I wanted to find. So I had to find out who had the same 16th great-grandmother as me, and who was also related to King Edward I, or the next three that I was related to. And so I Googled it, and Warren Buffett.
Really?
Warren Buffett. I'm not kidding. He boom, there it was. And he had his whole family tree. I started looking that up. I was able to find it from my great-great-grandmother, 16 layers deep, to King Edward I. And it's crazy. And it all fit together, and, expanded my family tree on Ancestry.com from about to the hundreds to, like 4,000.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that was completely by accident. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people, literally millions, that were in the same position I am and then don't know it. A lot of people hit a dead end, and the way you do it is to find somebody, with common ancestry as you, that has already done the work.
Mm-hmm. That's how I found out mine.
Yeah. There's so many peerages that are documented in Great Britain, UK, that, and it all has to do with property and ownership, and they kept impeccable records. And so that's how I found that out. And so it was seriously interesting. You can't really go to that part of the world, that really has some well-documented history dating back a couple thousand years without, seeing literal ghosts. I mean, it's fun.
Imagine.
Yeah. So it's very cool. So what's your ancestry, Kristin Harding? She's back. Short notice.
My name before I was married was Rollison, and my great-grandpère was Rollo the Viking, and he married, quote unquote, I would say took Papa de Bayeux, who was then queen in France. So she was the granddaughter of Charlemagne. So my lineage goes back 69 times great-grandmother, and that's how I traced it. Yeah.
So I've gone back, 25. 69 is.
But the funny thing is, if you look at a statue of her, we look a lot alike.
It's the hair, I bet.
Well, no, it's
maybe it's Maybelline
nose, and it's a little, pointy jaw, and it's just kind of funny.
Cool. So I'm joined again by Cassidae, Lightwing, Kristin Harding, who were recently on the show. We had a bigger show planned tonight, but that kind of fell through. That's why I was saying I hope this show didn't suck. Our guest, Rebecca Ann Heineman, apparently had some technical difficulties. Who knows?
Was she the Atari lady?
Yes.
Well, I was looking forward to that.
I know.
Me too.
Yeah. And so she's banned for life now from the show. Whitley Strieber was the first guy who was banned. Actually, Whitley Strieber, I was telling Cass, I didn't talk about it then. I had Whitley Strieber on, and, it's like 10 minutes before the show, and no Whitley. And I called him like 3-4 times. So I called him like the fifth time, like the last time, and he answers his phone. He goes, "Hello." And I said, Whitley, it's Cameron, and I'm just calling in to get a sound check. We can do the show. And I'm on another show right now. I said, right now. I got to go. Click. Wow. So, he tells me he's on a show. And so I'm like sitting there, what the F am I doing? And that was, a really big guest. And he was cool because Whitley sent me a book, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get an autograph book. No, it was a book. It was a hardcover book, which was cool. But it came right from the publisher, so it wasn't signed or anything. and gave that to one of my listeners. But, so he calls me back like in like 10 minutes. And he goes, I said, hello, Whitley. He goes, I'll call you back. Yeah, I mean, he just called me to tell me he'd call me back. So I waited and waited and waited. I waited like 45 minutes, and then he called me again. He goes, can we do this another night? And I said, yeah, I've been advertising it for tonight. All right, I'll call you back. So then he called me back probably 20 minutes later to tell me he'd call me back in a half hour. So it turned into about an hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours, something like that. And we actually did a pretty good show. And
cool.
He's not actually banned for life. Rebecca Ann Heineman is. No, not really. Nobody's banned for life. This is inherently the problem. And I know, Cass, you probably know this, that there's so many damn podcasts. People are either listening to podcasts, or if they're a big fan of them, they're either doing a podcast or they're a guest on a podcast.
Truth.
And they just space it out,
Yeah.
And, I'm guilty, but I give everybody my phone number. So literally one time, this is a couple of years ago, and it's in the summertime, and oh my God, it's just a beautiful day. It's just heaven. I'm going to go to the lake. I live right by this lake. And I'm going to go paddle boarding, and I get in my car, and I need to drive about 1 mile. And I get about 10 feet, my phone rings. And, it's these two guys. Yeah, Cameron, we're live now. And I was like, oh, geez. Like, I almost said, for what? So luckily I'm disciplined enough where I can fake pretending that I knew what was going on, and just kind of melded into this podcast. But it was a lot of fun, and to do it that way. I like to do it off the cuff. And then again, like right now, we didn't have this planned, so obviously we're going to do something, and hopefully make it interesting. Tonight we're audio only. Nice of you to look your best. I appreciate that. And because you can't see what I have this unbelievable tropical background with a palm tree waving. You can see waves back there. And
it is playing with my head.
I just did it for YouTube.
It's gorgeous. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
That's
it's messing with my head a little bit, but I like it.
Yeah, it's been a tough winter. I finally got a break. 2 weeks ago, I was in almost 20 below weather for 3 days, and it didn't get much better here. I was traveling, and now we're in the mid 30s, and it rained a couple days, and we had this frozen ground. So there's plenty of ice, and getting very tired of it. And as I usually say, I'm too young to be talking about the weather, but here I am. I digress. But so
I can't believe I missed that sound cue.
So to you kids, and Cass is the kid, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And so I want to pick your brains, because I had Rebecca scheduled. We can talk about her since she's not here. So this is interesting, and I found an interview. She was, if I go backwards to Wikipedia, which is my go-to place sometimes, says Rebecca Ann Heineman is an American game designer, programmer, and a longtime veteran in the video game industry. And Cass was telling me that he knows of her work. Also, let's see, she was a founding member of video game companies, Interplay Productions, Logicware, Contraband Entertainment, and Old School, which I'm well aware of. She's been chief executive officer of Old School since 2013. In 2003, she was diagnosed with gender dysphoria and began transitioning to live as a woman. She formally changed her name then to Rebecca Ann, and previously her name was William Salvador Heineman. She was born in Whittier, California. This is cool. When she was young, she could not afford to purchase games for Atari 2600. You guys know the Atari 2600?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm not
Yes, sir.
transitioning, but
Sorry.
I may now because I would be a much smoother talker and a better person possibly. But anyway, she couldn't afford games for 2,600, so she taught herself to copy the cartridges and built a sizable video game collection. I can't even imagine doing that. Cash, either one of you, how do you even start that? I have no idea.
Well, it would be reverse engineering, wouldn't it?
Well, kind of. I would imagine you buy some duplicate games or something, and you start out with a component, and then you have to reprogram. You know,
Right.
It's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And that's a time when we didn't have, back in the 80s, we didn't have all this information right now. I got a friend who has taken and he's bootlegged discs, I believe, for the PlayStation, original PlayStation. He built an emulator in his house, which basically had most popular video games and including the current PlayStation at the time. So multiple platforms, literally hundreds of games. And Cash, you're lighting up. I'm hoping you're doing some research really quick.
Yes, is the right
Yes,
person
sir.
to talk to.
All right. So add to that, please.
Oh, well, where do I even start? For starters, I can empathize with Rebecca on a lot of these issues. Being a trans person myself, I completely understand that. Also, not being able to afford video games and building yourself up to a mighty gaming empire from beyond infinity. So we share that. So yeah, I'm looking her up on Wikipedia because I played a few of her games, but not all of them. She has quite a list of quite frankly hits. I don't mean to kiss her boots, but here we go. She has some lemons on here too, but I don't think that's her fault.
Yeah, but somebody's lemon is somebody's
exactly
non-lemon, because there's some games that I think are complete crap that I couldn't even even be in the same room while they're being played. But she's just messaging us that she'll be in 22 minutes.
Well, hey, that's great. Right. I don't mind waiting.
Okay, go ahead and talk, Cass.
Oh yeah, so like a really good example of games she's worked on is Baldur's Gate 2: Shadows of Amn. I just bought the remake of that a few weeks ago. Dragon Quest or Dragon Wars, sorry, not Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest is a different franchise. Dragon Wars is a really good example. It was a very early game, circa early DOS game rather, and it didn't do so well commercially, but it still has a following to this day. I have gamer buddies to this day who still have their copy.
Cool.
So yeah.
I played it.
See, there we go. You do tell.
Oh, I loved it. It was available through Facebook. When Facebook first came out, they had some games, and Dragon Wars was one of them, and it was a lot nicer than like Mafia Wars or Vampire Wars or anything like that. And that is where I learned so much dragon lore. And to this minute, I think that I still have dragons working for each other instead of against each other. So, yeah.
Interesting. So I'm going to save my gaming story, my first gaming story, for when Rebecca's on. But and let's all kind of think about remembering what the first actual game you saw. Kristin, you're a year older than I am. I'm 56.
I will be 59 in August, and my first video game was Pong.
Okay, but save that thought because I have a good Pong story. Yeah. Oh, here she is.
Yay!
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad she's coming.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Sorry about the time mix-up.
That's all right. We're glad you're here. This is Cameron, and joining me is Cassidae Lightwing and Kristin Harding. These are the two. I wanted to bring them along because, first of all, we didn't know if you were going to be here. Kristin always has a lot to share. I'm 57. We're talking about how old we are and our gaming experience. I'm 56. Kristin is 58. Cass is like 30.
I wish.
Well,
He's the kid.
I'm 43, man.
I'm 66.
All right. So you're not 66.
No, 666.
Oh, there you go.
No, I'm actually 58.
Okay. So we're right in that. We're right in that. We're kind of in that time when things were starting to happen with gaming. And I think it's amazing that, Rebecca, that you did what you did. And many people know he's a champion gamer, but just let us know what you were into before the notion of video games ever entered your head.
Surviving. I was homeless and living out of a dumpster, and I was visiting a friend's house mostly because he had an Atari 2600. So I played games with him, and it wasn't until my mom divorced my dad that I was able to go back home.
What year was that? I don't even remember what year the 2600 came.
Well, the year I was in that situation was like 1978, 1978.
Right.
But the tournament was 1980.
Right. So Rebecca was in a Atari Space Invaders tournament in 1980, which she was a champion at the tournament. And I know you really didn't expect that, right?
No, not at all.
What was your skill level then? I mean, how was the skill level back then actually measured, and what was your skill level?
Well, the skill level was just basically measured who had the highest score. That really was it. And of course, because of my self-esteem being utterly destroyed, I thought I was the worst player in the whole group. I honestly went in there thinking that my skills were not up to par or anything like that, even though I would play the game and not even look at the screen anymore because I was just playing and killing all the aliens. But of course, from my point of view, I thought the game was so easy that anybody could do what I was doing. It never once occurred to me that it was so easy to me because my skill level was so high.
So were you playing a quarter machine? I mean, is that where you first found your love for that game?
Well, that one, no. Actually, it was in the Atari 2600 is a home game.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the arcades, I only played a little bit of Space Invaders, not very much because, the game itself was, I would play for like 5 or 6 minutes. And of course, kind of got bored. The game I was really into was like Asteroids or, Breakout were the ones I was into. And of course, later on, it was like Defender and Stargate, and Robotron. But that was later.
Do you remember the first game you ever played and how you felt about it then? Just
that was like Pong.
Right.
Like Pong.
Yeah. So that's what Kristin and I were both I said, hold on, you guys, don't talk about Pong yet because I have a Pong story. So Rebecca, when you played Pong for the first time, where was that? What do you remember? Because my memory is very vivid of that.
Well, I remember seeing it in I think it was like a bar or something like that because
yes.
My mom was dating a guy who was at the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and in their bar, shall we say, there was a Pong game that was brand new for them.
Yep.
And so while my mom was hanging out with her friends, I would be kind of babysat by put in the back with the Pong machine, and I would play that.
So I have friends who have similar stories. However,
me?
My one, Cass asks, you and Cass have a lot in common, but my buddy, he refers to the VFW as the V. And so his parents would pull into the V. They would go in. There was no gaming at the V in my friend's world. And once in a while, it didn't matter how hot it was or cold it was, the parents would come out with like a grape or a orange Shasta soda and give it to him in the backseat of the car. And he may spend the evening there. Now, that's not funny, but when I was a kid, that was kind of the babysitter of the community for small towns. My dad was in a bowling league, and he wouldn't take me bowling, but I think I begged, one night too much. And he took me to the bowling league night, and in the town there was 2 bowling alleys. The one was really cool and they had some stuff and there was food there. The other one had less, but the one that he went to that night had Pong, and I'd never seen anything like it. Honestly, I walked up to it and I can I have quarters? I would bet he gave me 2, and that's it. So I had maybe 4 hours to kill, and I'm on the Pong game, and ran back and forth. He wouldn't give me any more quarters. There was a couple of kids who had a quarter, and then finally I ran back and forth, and hoping it would just be on. Literally, I hit it with my finger, and the carpet and the static electricity sent a shock through the machine. It started up. We did that, I kid you not, for maybe 90 minutes. We played it solid, me and this other kid, and just running back and forth on the carpet, and it would fire the machine up. So we did it for free. But that's my memory, Rebecca, of Pong, which to me it was more than just 2 little bars going up and down with a ball that went blip, blip. I could see it in my head, and I could see more of something else in my head other than just those 2, 3 white lights.
I can see Zeus going, "Who is doing that?"
Well, certainly the operator of that machine was probably wondering why was the take in the machine was so low.
Right.
And Rebecca, what else did we do to that machine? I mean, you are also have engineered some amazing stuff in your life. I mean, obviously we could probably mess that thing up, and it needed more maintenance than usual in the future.
Well, later on in my life, I went ahead and became a video game repair woman. So I would, go in there and do board level repair, fix solder joints, but mostly it was trying to remove string, because what people did is they drilled a hole in a quarter, put a string on it, then they put the quarter in the mechanism and then jiggle it in such a way to give themselves like a dozen free games. But then it would get stuck, and then they would run away and leave the string sticking out until there's like 5 or 6 strings sticking out. I had to go in there and cut out all the strings, clear out the mechanism, and so forth. And then, of course, later on, more enterprising people found just the right spot, like on, what was it called? Pac-Man. There was a place where you could hit the front of the panel, and it would get your free game because it would trigger the coin detection switch just right.
I would like to apologize on behalf of my generation.
So I would imagine that kids back then beat the living hell out of the machines and shoved about anything they could in the slot or through the change slot to get just on the off chance that they could do something to get a play.
Mm-hmm. If it fits, it goes right there.
Yeah.
Well, I remember there was a game called Area 51. And now the game itself, the software played data off of a hard drive, and they mounted the hard drive on the cabinet wall. Somehow the kids figured out the location, and for the lulz, they would destroy the game by just going to the game and kicking it in that location, which would crash the hard drive.
Yeah, see,
and
that's not cool.
They're doing that all the time because they were brats.
Yeah, that's not acceptable.
It's still funny, though. I mean,
indeed.
Obviously they still do stuff like that today. And unfortunately, I know I've been in bigger cities that have video games. You go to Vegas and you can go into these great arcades, and they have the pinball museum in Vegas, and there's so many places like that. But they don't, at the VFW, like every bar in Montana, which I'm at, is full of gaming machines for profit, Keno, poker, etc. There's no blackjack, but any other kind of poker is available on machines as well as, and mostly it's just versions of Keno and poker. So we don't have video games here.
How do you live, sir?
Well, this is what I do now. I do, this is my outlet. I don't really explore the video gaming much anymore, even though I have a PlayStation 2 that has had very little use, and we have 2 of those in the house and a PlayStation 4. Or no, a PlayStation 3 times 2 and then a 4. So I was going to just mention really quick that tonight in the studio I have Rebecca Heineman, who at a very young age taught herself how to copy also video game cartridges. Rebecca, that was in 1980, in the 1980s. How do you even get started in copying back in the day when information was obtained very differently than it is today, like at the library?
Well, the thing is, the irony is that information was being exchanged much like it is today. It's just using different mechanisms. Back then, we used computer bulletin boards and modems. And so we would log on to the local BBS, then we would upload text files or scanned files onto their BBSs, and we would download whatever we want. And of course, there was back then CompuServe, the Source, Delphi, which were text-based bulletin boards on mainframes that were nationwide. And then that's where we would we create hidden forums where we would just go ahead and, like, one group we called was TAP, Technical Assistance Program. Our slogan was Ma Bell's Cheat Mother. And we would be exchanging information on exactly how the phone company worked and how to get free, what tones to control the system. But for the Atari 2600, what happened was that someone had gotten the schematic of the integer ROM card for the Apple II. Now, granted, it was available freely, but I didn't know that. They uploaded the schematic just like in a text file. I downloaded it. I then went ahead and went to Radio Shack, bought the appropriate parts, put one together, and then I realized that if I only had to add a read-write line, I can put RAM instead of ROM. And then from that, I then added dual porting. So they would then port over to a fake ROM cartridge on a Atari 2600. And then from that, I would be able to download the cartridge, put it onto this blank cart, upload the cartridge into the RAM, turn on the 2600, bingo, I was playing the game.
That's
Wow.
really
Then you guys wonder why I have issues with your technology.
So how big was an actual cartridge? How much information could it store?
On the 2600, they were anywhere from 2 to 4K.
2K.
Yeah,
Mhm.
2K. Most for like combat is on Breakout on the Atari 2600 is only 2,000 bytes of memory.
Wow.
But majority of cartridges were 4,000 bytes of memory. And it wasn't until later when they started using bank switching that allowed you to get 8K or higher. But those are the rare cartridges.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
But the majority were 2 or 4.
So
I'm
explain.
old enough to
Go
remember
ahead,
the floppy
Kristin.
disk, that we had to copy everything onto the floppy disk, the little disk, and then plug that into the computer, and then you could copy. Otherwise, it couldn't read it. So I understand what she's saying.
And then you couldn't even, like, I remember one time I had a big floppy disk and I had all this information. I had this job where I copied these documents. And then the person told me, and take this sheet of paper, which describes the contents, paper clip it to this and give it to somebody. I put the paper clip on and destroyed the floppy. And,
no.
so there was a learning curve for everybody. But Rebecca, go backwards a little bit and think about that 2600. Describe that to people, what it was, what different accessories that you could get with it, and how it actually worked.
Well, back then, there were a lot of accessories that came out later from other companies, but the Atari 2600 was a 6502-based little computer that had a video chip, and I'm going to use the term very loosely, because the way it worked was that you generated video on the fly. There was nothing like we take with modern computers where you just put data into a buffer of memory, and then the computer would magically just display that memory as long as it doesn't get touched. The 2600 did not have that. You actually had to, when the scan beam of your CRT, your television, was moving across, as it was moving, you were drawing the lines and drawing all the pixels. So it's one of the reasons why the Atari 2600, the games all ran at 60 frames per second, was because you couldn't do anything except run 60 frames per second, because if you couldn't keep up with the CRT, your game would crash. Or at least the video display would look like garbage.
Mhm.
So it really was a completely different paradigm to how we program games today.
So what's different about today? I mean, when you did a video game, or you were a video game designer programmer, what did that look like in the 80s if you were doing that commercially? And is there a huge difference now to someone like you who can probably see through a game right down to its code? So when you see somebody doing their job today versus what it looked like in 1980, I mean, what's the, other than these huge computers that have such a magnificent capacity, What's the difference between the person and from when you were doing it to these guys who are doing it right now?
Well, back then, the Atari 2600, the Intellivision Coleco, the systems were so simple. It was easy for one person to be able to program all aspects of a game. And also, 2,000 bytes or 4,000 bytes does not take that long to fill up with a video game. So therefore, in some cases, it's like, oh, the ROM is full. Therefore, the game is done. Because, you're not going to spend any more, the ROM's not getting any bigger. So there you go. And when you're designing the game, you have to design it for the limitations of the console, which were very, very, very limiting. So it's one of the reasons why games on the Atari and the Intellivision tended to look similar to each other, was because they were kind of limited to what the Atari 2600 or the Intellivision could do. So you had to design everything around what limits you had in your system. Whereas today, as far as visuals are concerned, there are no limits because with 32-bit color per pixel and 1024 by 768, or nowadays it's 4K resolution, each image could be a photo. So with that, there is now no limit to what you can display. The limit is what it is you're going to display. And that requires artists and modelers and animators and writers, and you're essentially making a movie. Whereas on the Atari 2600, you have an 8x8 grid of dots, 64 dots. Even I, with a marker, can draw images in that.
So this is a question that it got me thinking. So I want to talk to you about, it's very impressive that you won such an amazing contest when you were 14 years old, which was
16.
The Space Invaders. Was it a national or world championship, or was it a national championship? So you were 14 years old, and then later on, 16. I'm sorry. And later on, you had an incredible career and still do with so many different things. So when you were 16 and you stepped into this huge room with all these Ataris, and you're competing against, obviously it wasn't all kids, but you may have been one of the youngest. Where was that? Let everybody know how that started. Was it the first one? What was it like? And obviously you came out on top with that. Was amazing. But how did that thing get put together? Who put it together? Why? And where was it? And how did you first hear about it?
Okay. It came together at Atari, and it was supposed to be an advertising venue. They just released Space Invaders for the Atari 2600. It was a big deal, but Atari wanted to have this idea to get excitement for getting people to buy the game. Someone at Atari came up with the idea of doing a nationwide contest. Now, at the time, Atari also had a thing called the Atari Club. And when you buy Atari cartridges, there's always a form in it. You fill it out, and you can just join their club. And if you pay a membership fee, they give you a comic book and discounts. And of course, sometimes there's exclusive cartridges like Quadron that can only be purchased through the Atari Club. Well, I was a member of the Atari Club. I sent in my postcard, and then later on, I just got the newsletter like once every 2 months. It was like a little booklet that would tell you, it's like kind of like you have Nintendo Power, which was all advertising and celebrating the Nintendo. Atari did it first with the Atari Club. Now, because the Atari Club essentially was a giant mailing list, what Atari did was that in the 5 cities they planned to actually have the regionals, they used the mailing list from the Atari Club and mailed a flyer to all the kids or all the people and the members of the club into those cities. So of course, me being in Los Angeles area, I got the flyer. And the flyer looked like the box art of Space Invaders, and it says, "Coming soon to Topanga Canyon Plaza Mall on this day in June." No, that was October. It was October 10th or something like that. On that day, come on down for a $1 entry fee. You can compete, and whoever gets the highest score gets an all-expense paid trip to New York. And so that's how I found out about it. So then when I went there on the appropriate day, the way they did it was that in the center of the open area of the mall, they had these circular tube-like kiosks set up. I'd say about 20 of them. And each one, they had an Atari 2600 on both sides. So it meant there was like 40 stations. Then they had like the spectator tape, so those poles with the line guard or the ribbons that they use to make lines with for like Disneyland rides, where you have the people going through a long, long line to get there. They had that first circling the area, and then there was an entrance in which they had a long queue, a big line area that you would just get in and go through the maze to get to the entrance where they would take your ticket. Then there was a place where they had like a little ticket booth, somebody with a table, when you would just give them $1 and then they would give you a ticket. You then just get in line and wait your turn. And what they would do is that they would have the person come in, you give them your ticket, they would take you to the next open station where there would be a judge whose job it is just to see, make sure A, you're not cheating, and B, to take your score. And a person would just give them their ticket, get by the game. The judge would then hit reset and the game would begin. Once you died, your game ended, they would record your score on a piece of paper that would say, "Congratulations on defeating the alien hordes. Here's your score." Blah blah. And,
Hey.
A little thing saying, "Hey, look, I competed and I did this." And then once they started seeing scores in the neighborhood of like 10,000 points, they would then take that to the judges, who would then say, "Okay, no, that would place like 16, not worthy," and they had a sign to have the top 10. And I think the top score was something like around 20,000 at the time when I first entered. And then, of course, it was my turn. I then went up to my station. They started the game. I started playing and playing and playing and playing and playing. And of course, the game only had 4 digits for the score. So every time I hit 10,000 points, he would tally things. 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark, 4 mark. So finally, when the alien, I just, I was so bored. I was talking with the guy saying, "Hey, how's it going? What's the weather? What's it like here? And this is far away from my home. Are you going? Did they hire you in this area, or are you flying with the Atari people?" Just anything to keep myself from going buggo because it was boring. But then the alien landed on me, so of course it was instant loss. And he then said, "Okay, let's see your score. 88,500 points or something like that." And my only reaction was, "Is it good?" And he goes, "I don't know." And at that point, he wrote it down on my little paper, handed me the little sheet, and said, "Thanks." And I started walking away. And as I was walking away and getting ready to leave the area, somebody from Atari came up to me and said, "Hey, is it okay if we hold back your score?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" Because well, your score is more than double the number 1 score.
Yeah.
We don't want to scare people away. And "Oh, okay, I don't care, but I've got my little sheet here. It says I got 88,000 points, so I'll come back later." And so I walked away. I went with my friend. He got like 3,000 points or something like that, which is the normal range of the score. And after it was around just before 5 o'clock, we came back to the area. And then that's when they said, "Yep, well, you're the winner. We posted your score." And with it, you're now they announced me saying, "I'm the winner of the Atari 2600 regional championships for Los Angeles, and I'm going to be representing Los Angeles in the nationals." And then that's when they took me aside and asked me my name, my address, phone number, and essentially, so that where they can send the ticket and so forth. I said, "Sure." Okay, and I gave them all the information, and then that was that. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later when I get this express, courier letter in the in the mail saying that here's your plane ticket, because enclosed was a plane ticket and my itinerary. And I'm like, oh, this is real. I'm actually going to New York.
Nice.
I love, Rebecca, the photo of you. It shows you and a couple other people playing the game, and it seems like the most awkward angle. You had to like look up toward the screen.
Oh yeah.
It looked like a total kitchen chair that you were sitting on. It's not a gaming chair at all.
Oh yeah, it was a kitchen. It was a folding chair that you expect at a high school or something.
Right.
And the whole design was they had the TVs above our head because behind us was about 200 members of the press.
Mm-hmm.
So if the monitor was at my eye level, nobody could see it. So they had it way up there so that even though I had to look up to see the game, it meant everybody sitting behind me could see what I was doing, including the judges.
That makes sense.
So you had then you scored 162 or 165 to 200, right?
Yep, that was it. And that was because it was only that low because what they said when they told us just before the game began, it was supposed to be sudden death. In other words, we played until it was the last man standing, and then that was going to determine who was going to win, because they thought it was going to be like some sort of a TV show where in 10 minutes this person is going to fall out, then another 20 minutes another person is going to fall out, and another, so that by the time it's like an hour, maybe hour and 10 minutes, they think was at the maximum, all of us would be, 4 people would have already fallen out, leaving one person behind, and then that person would be crowned the winner. And that was the original intent. The only thing they didn't factor in was that we were all of skill level that we could play the game for as long as we were awake.
Yeah.
They didn't know who they were dealing with.
Well, like here's another example. When they gave me my plane ticket, there was only one ticket in the envelope because it never occurred to them that the winners of the contest would not be adults.
Right.
20/20 hindsight.
Because as you can imagine, an unaccompanied minor flying at the expense of a corporation is a litigation nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
But a dream come true for.
Oh yeah. But so like when I was there at the Nationals, I was there by myself because our family, we didn't have money, we couldn't afford a plane ticket. The other 4 contestants each had a parent with them. New York was not a problem because the guy lived in town, so he didn't have to worry. But the other 3 actually, on their own expense, paid for their parents or parents to fly with them. Whereas I was there by myself, and that's what really freaked out the people at Atari because they're like, wait a minute, this is a 16-year-old kid. Where's your parents? Like, I only have one ticket and we don't have the money to fly in. What do you think we are, Atari employees? But it went back to when once the game began and we started playing, they actually had some people there. I don't know who they were because I couldn't turn around and look at them, but they were actually doing like a commentary play-by-play like you hear at a football game. Mm-hmm. But after about 10 minutes, they kind of stopped because it's like, okay, the aliens went to the left, they went to the right, they left to the left. Okay, that gets old real quick. But after about 20 minutes, the guy from Chicago, the aliens landed on him. So he was out. So, of course, from Atari's point of view, it's like if one drops every 20 minutes, we got a great show.
Right.
An hour and 45 minutes go by. All 4 of us are still going. So, as you can imagine, all the press in the back and all the spectators and even the company executives from Atari are like, I'm going to go take a nap now. Anybody need a break, bathroom break? Because, the issue is that none of the spectators who were all from the press didn't want to leave the room because they didn't want to be the time when the champion is crowned. So there were people doing the dance, the pee-pee dance and so forth, but it was like, we got to end this. So I was just sitting there playing the game, and then I just heard the announcer out of the blue just say, And so concludes the first annual Atari 2600 Space Invaders tournament, because they actually thought this was going to be an annual thing.
Right.
And then at that point, the judges then get up and go to the other room. And I remember asking him, going like, "Does this mean we can stop playing?" And he goes, "Yes, you can stop playing now." And at that point, I just yanked the cartridge out of the console, put it on yanked it out without even turning it off, put it onto the console, and just sat back in the chair going like, "Oh, I am never playing that game again."
Did you know you had the highest score?
No, because we were only focused on our own consoles. So nobody could take the time to look at the other consoles, because the way the game was made is that if you even lose your concentration for even a moment, you're dead.
Wow.
So, and that's what they were counting on. They were hoping that we would have 5 people who, after an hour and a half to hour 45 minutes, that they would drop their concentration for just a moment and die. And eventually there'll be one person standing after an hour. But no, Hing Ning, Frank Tetro, and I forgot the guy from Texas, and myself. No, we were going the distance. So, yeah.
So how much, what were the other scores? Do you remember remotely?
I think number 2 was 150. The number 3 was 143. And the guy from Texas only had 126,000, which surprised me. He must have played a really, really cautious game to have that low of a score. Or maybe he never shot the UFO. I mean, that could have done it too.
Right. So basically, if you're sitting side by side with 4 other people and you have comparable skill levels, you should be within range of each other. I mean, literally shooting range with each other, and you're not going to top somebody by, like, say, 50,000, 100,000.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we were all within the appropriate ranges based on gaming styles, because we were all playing the very same game, very difficulty, same amount of time. It's just a matter of who had the most aggressive tactic to clear out the most number of boards in the time allotted. Right. And I just happened to have played a very aggressive game.
So did I see a picture of you with your name on your back? Did they make those shirts for you?
Yeah, they made them. Cool. They gave them to us in the hotel room the night before.
Do you still have it?
And they asked, no. Oh wait, no, I do have it, but most of the letters already popped off of it, so it's more of a rag than an actual souvenir.
Cool,
than anything else.
That could be your retirement someday. Who knows?
Who knows? Now, if anything, it'll end up at the Video Game History Museum.
Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, I just gave them like some one-of-a-kind cartridges I had and so forth. A lot of artifacts, because it's like one of those where, I could probably have sold it for a very, very high amount of money, but I'm not really in it for the money. Right. I'm in it to make certain that these stories are told and remembered.
What was your prize? What'd you win?
I won a tabletop missile command. Originally, it was supposed to be a stand-up asteroids game, but I told them I don't have space in my bedroom for that. I just don't. So I then suggested to them, how about we switch it out for a tabletop missile command? And he said, okay.
That's a good one.
That's what I got, and it fit in my bedroom.
That's a good one. That was one of my favorite. I loved asteroids, but Missile Command. When Missile Command came out, I think I don't remember the exact sound of it, but it had a lot more sound than Space Invaders. Space Invaders was fairly simple.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Space Invaders came out years before Missile Command. Yeah. Remember, Space Invaders was black and white. They used colored acetate sheets to do color, whereas Missile Command was a full color game.
Right. Yeah, I didn't, I think I don't even remember the first time I played Space Invaders, but I think it was probably not too far from here. There's a place called Burger Town, and they had a good selection of games, but it was probably in the mid 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
So,
dun.
Yeah, exactly. Cass is a prolific gamer, and he's also knows a lot about comics, and he was really, really excited. So I want him to ask you a couple questions, because not only have you been the 1980 champion of Space Invaders, you've done a lot more. So Cass, go ahead.
Oh, wow. Where do I even start? On the subject of video games, Well, the last one of your games that I played was with my kids, and that was Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh yes, I remember that one.
Well, any stories you have from that, I would love to tell Shar. She would like to hear it.
Oh gosh, there is some good stories. Like for one, the reason I got hired by Sensory Sweep to do that project was because the people doing the game weren't very good PlayStation programmers. So what had happened is that the game at the time was only running at about 10 frames per second. And that was very, very slow. And the contract said quite clearly they had to deliver it running at 30. So they were running the risk of losing the contract because the game was running so slowly. So I came in, I went ahead and took a look at the game, and I was appalled at how badly it was written. So I then spent like about 2 days doing some optimizations. But then the owner of the company, a guy named David, God, what was his last name? Oh, well, but the guy who owned Sensory Sweep, he approached me and says, look, we really need this. And if you could optimize the game to 30 frames per second, I'll buy you a sushi dinner at the best restaurant in town. And this is this was in Ogden, Utah. So it's like Salt Lake City.
Good sushi in Ogden.
I have questions.
Yep. Well, anyways, because I told him I really wanted to have some sushi because I liked sushi at the time, but I was still a connoisseur of burgers. But there was some sushi restaurants in Salt Lake City, but the trouble is that they're quite frightfully expensive. But he was just telling me, okay, yeah, if you can do this, I'll give you the sushi dinner. And so it's okay, fine. Well, then went back to work. A week later, I rewrote their entire 3D engine partially in assembly on the PlayStation 2. Once I did that, I got the game running at 60 frames per second. Not 30, 60.
Nice.
Nice.
So once that happened, I then went ahead and went up to Dave and said, hey, Dave. And he goes like, what? You owe me a sushi dinner. I was like, what? So I took him to my desk and I showed him the game and was like, this is a trick. It's like, nope, it's working just fine. And with that, he says, fuck. There's my one swear word that I am allowed. And at that point, we then, had his other engineers look at it and said, no, the game's running at 60 frames per second, which means that we can actually put in the higher quality models we couldn't use because the game was running so slow. So now we make the game run at 30 frames per second, but at least the Chipmunks didn't look like characters from Roblox. But then they took me to this really fancy sushi restaurant where I stuffed my face for like $135, which of course, remember in 1990.
A lot of sushi back then, Rebecca.
It was also very expensive back then.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it was still, then stuffed my face and that was that. So at that point, I worked on the game for a bit more until we shipped it, and then Sensory Sweep went out of business. So there you go.
Yeah, well,
for as far as your video game design goes, what was your what video game, if you're going to just be remembered by a video game, what video game are you most proud of, or basically notorious for, and why?
Well, the one I'm most proud of is Bard's Tale 3, The Thief of Fate. That's the one that a lot of people just love and remember the most because of the Bard's Tale series, including Bard's Tale 4. It's Bard's Tale 3, the one everybody remembers.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it had a tight story, it had all sorts of new features. It was just a really fun game.
Yeah. Bard's Tale 3 was good enough that Bard's Tale 4 was disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be hard to imagine Cassidae in a computer class, but once we were done with our homework, we could play games like Bard's Tale and things like that. So I went through those.
Did you have Cass, I wanted you to ask comic questions because you brought up a word that I had never heard of prior to us starting the show.
Which word?
You had said something about I actually
Ranma?
I
Yes. I don't know that.
Probably.
No, the word was Ranma.
It was Ranma, yeah. What is that?
Ranma wasn't. Sorry. I get really passionate about Ranma. Sorry.
What's
Good.
Ranma, Rebecca?
No, let him say it.
Okay, go ahead, Kat.
Oh, okay. Ranma One Half is a Japanese comic that quite literally saved my life when I was a teenager. It's a comedy comic about a martial arts kid who, through a series of misadventures, gets cursed that he turns into a female whenever he gets splashed with cold water. And for a kid, this is before we understood a lot about Klinefelter syndrome. So for me, it was like I could put everything that I was experiencing and into the comic, you know. So it was almost like a psychological therapy, that particular Ranma One Half. And for those of you who are interested in anime, I highly recommend Rumiko Takahashi's work. She's the one who did Ranma One Half. You might know her better as the studio that did Inuyasha, but Cassidae hates Inuyasha with a passion. So, so Rebecca does an amazing doujinshi, which is a fan comic combining elements from Ranma One Half and Sailor Moon. And so I had the link ready to go and everything in case you didn't show up.
All right. Hey, keep talking because I have no idea. I mean, I don't even know what to ask, but I want to hear more about it because I love your enthusiasm. Either one.
Well, here's what it is. Sailor Ranko, which is the name of my comic book, asks the question, what if the cast of Ranma One Half meets up the cast of Sailor Moon? My answer is hilarity ensues. Now, what you've got here is Ranma One Half is a comic that is a comedy, a slapstick martial arts comedy with lots of physical comedy. You know, basically the punchline of a joke is literally somebody getting punched. But the basis is you have a character named Ranma, who is a young boy who went on a training journey with his father. Mishaps occurred, and he ended up falling into this pool, which is the pool of the spring of drowned girl. And as because of it, he has a curse that if he gets touched with cold water, he gets turned into a girl. His brain doesn't change, so he still acts like a guy, talks like a guy, even though he looks like a pretty girl. Hot water will reverse the curse, but part of the curse also is that he constantly gets hit with cold water. You mostly
Like
at
a
the
magnet.
worst possible time. Like if somebody is walking by with a cup of water, the cup of water will spill on him. It's just going to happen. And so it's, you know, like in fact, one of his running jokes is like 24 hours without getting turned into a girl. Splash. Okay, 24 hours. So that's now his father falls into a pool called the Spring of Drowned Panda. Same curse, except he gets turned into a panda instead of a girl. There are other characters who get turned into other animals and things as well, but that's the basis of the character. And of course, he has a pseudo girlfriend in which, when the story begins, his father is friends with another man, and the two decided that they want to join their families. And in Japanese tradition, you do it through marriage. So one man promises Ranma, the other man promises his daughter Akane, and say they must marry. The two, of course, are not too thrilled about this, and they're constantly fighting, mostly because they don't like being forced into marriage. All right, so that's Ranma One Half. Sailor Moon is a magical girl superhero story where you have 5 girls, schoolgirls, who are bestowed magic powers that if they say some magic words, they turn into these superheroes who use magic to go ahead and shoot fireballs or ice or something against monsters. And these 5 girls have other girls that are also Sailor Scouts, but they're not really the main core 5 group. And they're girly. Oh, everything about them is so freaking girly.
Yes.
Now, of course, they meet up with the female version of Ranma. And in my comic, due to circumstances, it turns out that he's the reincarnation of a woman who wanted to be a Sailor Scout long, long ago when the Sailor Scouts were a thing back in the past. So in other words, his birthright is that he also is supposed to be a Sailor Scout, but the girls don't know he turns into a guy. And so they're constantly having this new one, Sailor Sun, help them out. But at the same time, Sailor Sun's talking like a guy, insulting their attacks, insulting the girliness, insulting their magical moves, and the other girls are like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah. Honestly, I just discovered the comic today, and I wish I had discovered it a long, long time ago. Before I say what I'm about to say, Mrs. Heineman, I want you to understand I am an extremely exacting and harsh art critic, like way more than I should be. Kristin could back it up. I get real mean. And I have to say the art in your comic is absolutely mesmerizing. You know, you've got all the beats right. You've got all the you don't overuse the Japanese expressions or the manga expressions like a lot of Teen Titans. You know what I mean? They think all they got to do is slap together a bunch of shticks and they've got an anime. It don't work like that. You know, and your comic grabs all of it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, if you also notice, there's a lot of American humor in there too. It's a big. I really worked very hard on making sure the cinematography, the choreography, and the storyline works because I am a writer, and one of my biggest pet peeves, most stories, is the villain is evil. Why? Well, in this story, no, the villain is not evil for evil's sake. There is a reason he's doing what he's doing, which is explained in chapter 11. Until then, he seems to be like a comic book villain, like, I'm going to twirl my mustache because I'm going to take over Tokyo and I'm evil. But if you watch, as you read, you're going to realize he's being smart about his tactics. He's, everything has a reason. Everything has a backup plan. Everything. And in fact, he's like when his villains screw up, his minions screw up, he doesn't kill them. He just says, okay, we've learned from this. We will now change our tactics.
See, and that fits the genre too.
Yeah. And everything fits the genre. And of course, it's the juxtaposition between Ranma is a misogynist. And it shows through in my writing is that he is still a misogynist, but slowly he's having that misogyny literally being pounded out of him. Because once you get to chapter 11, there's a whole thing where Akane is, I think, at least 10 pages is nonstop her beating the crap out of him.
Yeah. And for the woke people listening, I just want to point out with Ranma, he is a misogynist. This is true, but it's that kind of like young boy misogyny. Like, I don't understand girl parts. It's not that he actually literally thinks bad of women. It's just that he don't know no better. And he learns better in the story.
Yes.
That's good. That's a good question and a good response because I think that Cass provides some good insight there. I like the question. I like the answer. I like the back and forth of that. It's very meaningful and it gives some depth to that because it's something that, that's an art that I don't know much about. I'm not going to say I don't understand it because I haven't given myself a chance to understand it. My daughter is into that and she's Asian and she's from Southeast Asia. And so that's kind of one of those things that I'm going to jump in. And I think this is a good starting point, I believe.
I would agree. And I would think that her adaptation is a really good jumping off point. I'm not just kissing her boots because I like her artwork. Just from what I've read so far, just like what she says, it's like a perfect blend of Japanese and American humor, and they have a very, very different morality. So I think it's a good jumping off point.
So Rebecca, what made you decide to move in that direction artistically? I mean, it's one of those things that I know in my part of the world we're not really exposed to. So how did you get exposed to it? What made you decide to do that?
Well, I got involved in Japanese culture back in the Super Nintendo days because you see,
makes sense.
At Interplay, we were going to be we already were doing Nintendo 8-bit games, but we were trying to branch out to do Super Nintendo games. But Nintendo was really hesitant at letting American companies go onto their new platform. They wanted us to only do games for their for their Nintendo 8-bit system. So they gave us all the technical manuals and everything. But the Super Nintendo, they really, really were dragging their feet. And one of their excuses was, we haven't translated our manuals from Japanese to English yet, and it's going to take us a year.
And we'll still do it badly.
Yeah. And I'm like, it's going to take you a year? Okay, this can't be that hard. So I then hired a tutor and went to Orange Coast College, I think it was. And I hired the teacher to give me private lessons. And with my teacher, I learned enough katakana and kanji to basically translate the manuals. And what's made it really easy is most of the words were actually English words in katakana. So once I memorized the katakana glyphs, which are like 46 characters, I'd say about half the manual was translated just for me learning that. The rest of it was just, with, like words I couldn't understand because I couldn't read that particular kanji. I would ask my teacher, hey, what's these kanjis means? Oh, it means this. Like, oh, yeah. And then I would finish up the job. And then with that, I then shared that information with Silicon and Synapsys, which was now today known as Blizzard. And that's how RPM Racing was made. Wow. That was our first game for Interplay using the Super Nintendo. And it was all done with manuals I translated from Japanese.
Well, I wish more companies had you.
Okay.
And then after that, I just developed a taste for the language and the culture. And I just kept learning and studying and watching anime and so forth, all the way to present day.
So a lot of huge companies will say this, and I don't necessarily think they mean it, but they say this to be politically correct. You're talking about different people and working with different people in different cultures, but how important is diversity in a workplace like you were involved with? I mean, is it important?
Absolutely.
And what's that look like? What sort of paradigm does that hold for the workplace environment, and what should it look like if it's not diverse?
Well, the issue with diversity is it's not necessarily just having people of color or women on your team.
Exactly. Yeah.
We also bring other viewpoints, and we show how narrow-minded a development is by bringing in different people. Now, here's a case in point. This is a true story. I was working at Microsoft on a project called the Kinect. It is that camera that allows you to track people's bodies for the Xbox 360. The Kinect had not been released. It's not been released. It was still in development. And my job was to come in there and optimize the code to make it run faster. Mm-hmm. The issue, I come to go ahead and try out the unit. So I'd stand up in my office and start moving around. But the camera only could see me from my torso to my head. Mm. It couldn't track my legs. I was wearing a long dress.
Oh, yeah, that could be a problem.
They never, ever tested the unit on somebody wearing a dress.
See,
and
that's
they
the kind
were
of bonehead.
getting ready to start mass produce. Sorry, they were getting ready to test market this. And then of course they would say, but why would you want to wear a dress while playing a video game? I'm standing there playing the video game. And they're like, oh, maybe it's because you're not a girl. Maybe because,
only men play video games? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, considering that all team members were men, it never occurred to them to train the thing for dresses.
So I have a question based on that exact subject. One of the issues I had with the Kinect, I'm not sure if you're on this team or any insight you could share. Basically, I am a giant, but I have a female bone structure. I could not get the Kinect to recognize that I move like a female. You see what I mean?
Yep.
So it's just like that's the kind of thing I'm right there with you.
Yeah, the issue at hand was that once I brought up the fact that the dresses, then they went ahead and got men with kilts, and I then brought up saying, what if you're in a wheelchair and you can't get up?
Right.
Because I brought up saying, well, the Kinect seems to work from the waist up. So can't we train it so that it recognizes you're on a wheelchair to just only track you from the waist up? And things like that. But bone structure, I could see how if you have what they consider an abnormal bone structure, because of the way we did the AB tables, where it could confuse it. But again, there were some times where they just had to make certain compromises because we had to ship the thing.
Okay.
But It's one where, like, when 10% of the gaming population are going to wear a long dress and not either tights or a mini skirt or something, that 10%, which is a sizable number of people, they had to at least. The way they solved it was that it did do some tracking of the legs, but we did put a note there saying it's preferred you're wearing skin tight or jeans or something like that, pants, to get the best performance out of it. But at least we had that in the disclaimer for best case uses instead of, a dress. Oops.
Right. Well, thank you for answering that. That's been a question.
Good one. So, Rebecca, I don't know if you've been asked this, and I scoured the internet because I wanted to find out, and I can't find anything about it. And I have maybe 20 pages open on my desktop of interviews you did and your website, which is very cool, by the way. But on my show, we talk about everything alien. I love Space Invaders. And so I'm always Googling alien and whatever, and space. And I'd run across you numerous times, you pop up over and over again. But so this is, you don't have to give us your honest answer, but I would want to ask you the question anyway. And according to the experts that I've talked to and people that fed me information, there's a decrease in UFO sightings and military encounters in the 1960s, and then a resurgence of activity in the 1970s. The U.S. government, particularly the CIA, hatched all kinds of plans to infiltrate the civilian household to monitor alien experiences within our borders. So I have to ask you. And I really want to ask you this because this happened globally and in many public and private sectors, as well as our government and national governments. Was Atari Club a CIA front? Real question. No. So here's where this comes from. Okay. I was told, and this is a guy that I know by the name of Earl, who first fed this to me quite some time ago. He swears that early video gaming was a front to combat a silent invasion that occurred in 1972 through about 1985. And they were possibly putting devices, or they had the opportunity, the CIA, to put electronic devices in homes. Now, do I believe it? No. However, it's one of these conspiracies that are out there. And there's also a letter from the Department of Defense, I guess it is, that sort of touches upon this. It doesn't exactly say Atari, but there's an acronym that's SP-IRATA, which is Atari spelled backwards with the SP in there. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, I've heard of those, and we all laughed it off, especially at Atari, because they're like, it would be wonderful to work for the CIA because then maybe they can get access to some satellites and stuff like that. But no, I toured the Atari Club because there was a time after I won the championship, I was invited in the middle of 1981 to go up to Atari. And I actually toured the club, toured the buildings and stuff like that. And no, none of that stuff existed. And of course, the moment you even look at the conspiracy theory as in how would they implement it, you would find it would immediately fall apart. Like, example, let's just say that somebody would invent a video game that has some sort of device in it that can phone home. Here's my question. How? In 1980, there was no such thing as cell phones. There was no such thing. Radios and walkie-talkies had a range of 250 feet. And if you wanted to have any sort of telecommunication, you had to hook it up to your phone. I didn't see anybody plugging in your Atari 2600 to a phone jack. So how was it going to be? Martians? I mean, no, that's not happening because it's physically possible for the technology of the time.
What about typical technology and like FBI, CIA surveillance at the time where they would actually implant a device and, of course, be able to like drive through the neighborhood and possibly monitor? I mean, there is that. No.
There is no such thing as implanting a device that would be with a van going around, because now you would have to figure out, in order for them to monitor one person, it would require a staff of 5 minimum per person they're monitoring. Yeah. It will not take very long that you would need more FBI employees than there are in the people in the United States to have this kind of level of surveillance.
Exactly.
And let's look at it from another point of view. No conspiracy survives if there's more than 10 participants, because statistically, somebody is going to talk.
Yep.
Those are good points.
So if you have,
but those are good points.
but if you have a conspiracy that involves thousands of people, i.e., let's say a fake moon landing, it is 100% certainty that within 1 year, a conspiracy over 1,000, somebody is going to talk. In addition to talking, probably produce evidence like, look at Edward Snowden, look at Chelsea Manning.
Mhm.
Both of those people were involved, not necessarily in conspiracy, but they were working in places where if you talk, you will go to bloody jail.
Yeah.
And guess what? They talked anyways.
And then they went to jail.
And then, well, one went to jail, the other ended up in Russia.
Oh,
But-
fair enough.
Right.
You see, my point is that anytime you even think of a conspiracy in which requires more than 10 people to be part of the conspiracy, math tells you you will by now already have it blurted on the internet or on WikiLeaks or something like that,
Yeah.
and it's over. So, yeah.
So what do you think that perpetuates that kind of conspiracy? Because Cass and I, and of course, Kristin, we all know a bunch of conspiracies that are red hot, and they have been since 1992 or 89. And they're not going to go away anytime soon. And they're filled with exactly what you described. And the other thing is that, it's not consistent with other people who describe being at the same place or time or saw the same
Right.
thing. But even though they're not,
It boils down to people want to feel special because they know forbidden knowledge.
Yeah.
They know a secret that you don't. They know that the fill in the blank did the fill in the blank. They know.
Right.
They don't have any evidence to this, but the fact that they say they know this stuff is true makes them feel special or enlightened, and then therefore better than you because they know the truth and you don't, despite
Right.
the fact that the truth that they supposedly know is something that came out of the plot of a movie and not reality.
Or a
It's
game
not
book.
It's not
That's-
secret knowledge.
that's quotable. I mean, that's amazing that you say that, because that's the way I feel. And although, I don't base my beliefs on other people's beliefs or conspiracy. I base it upon my own experiences as well, which are strange and unusual. But the other thing is, I've kind of come up with my own school of thought and how things work, and in addition to injecting a lot of science into that. I don't like the way, Rebecca, things are going right now politically, because I don't like to see us getting away from science. I mean, you're an empirical person who realizes there is black and white and various other shades of gray, but where do you see us in 25 years from now? Because it looks to me...
25 years, I'll tell you that far. That would be that's when we're rebuilding the United States after the Second Civil War, and we're already making a new constitution or adding a whole slew of amendments in order to ensure that the Third Civil War doesn't happen the same way the Second Civil War did.
So
way
good
you
amendments then.
Well, look at the First Civil War. I'm using that as an example.
Right.
When the First Civil War concluded, we added things like the 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. Those amendments were added specifically to enshrine that slavery will never be part of the law of the land, and things like the insurrectionists and stuff are no longer allowed to hold office. And it was all about ensuring that the reason we fought was to make certain that certain individuals, are treated as equal American citizens. Sadly, certain white supremacists did their best the last 100 years to undo those, very slowly undo those amendments and the equal rights. But, kind of says that, even though we fought an entire war, we didn't get rid of the white supremacists that started the Civil War. So we're headed for a second one. And sadly, these white supremacists are being fed a massive boatload of lies and are living in a world that doesn't exist, but it exists to the point where they believe it's true and they're willing to take up arms to fight for whatever the hell they're believing in.
Interesting. What about, do you think, what would be I mentioned the CIA. We kind of touched a little bit about the FBI, but what about these clandestine groups and agencies that, unnameable clandestine groups and agencies within our own government? Does that exist? And if so, is there a place for that? Or should we have them be totally non-transparent like the CIA should be and the FBI should be?
Give us
right now, organizations like the FBI and CIA are being run by the government. And the government's not exactly a bastion of well-organization. I mean, if you look at the reports of the aftermath of 9/11, part of the report was ripping apart both the CIA and the FBI because they were each having a rivalry over each other about what information they had, and they didn't share. And it was because of that why we got flat-footed and a bunch of terrorists blew up the World Trade Center. And it was because of their disorganization and their pettiness and stuff. I mean, kind of goofy. The only clandestine organizations that exist are ones that have nothing to do with the government. It's just basically you have bad apples, just like in police departments. There are racist cops. They're just not going to tell anybody they're racist. They're just going to be racist, and they're going to deny civil rights to people of color and so forth. But because they happen to be a cop, it makes the entire department look bad. But they're doing bad things under the color of authority. There are people like that in CIA. There are people like that, there are people like that all over the place. It's not limited to the government, because there are people who are just bad, but they're great at hiding their bad. Now there are small groups like, I don't know, the KKK, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, which are more open about being bad people. It just goes on.
Cass, you have your hand raised politely.
Yeah, this is going to be a kind of an oddball question, but as an outside observer, do you think that the people that you're mentioning, do you think they think they're evil? Do you think they think they're doing the right thing?
No true villain believes that they're evil.
I will disagree with you
there. Even Adolf Hitler believed what he was doing was best for Germany. Any outsider would look at him and say, this guy's a flaming nutball. But from his point of view, he thought he was doing the right thing. All these people, every one of them, all those people that encompass the Circle Congress trying to overthrow the government, actually thought they were doing something good. But if they actually could get out of their fantasy land of the lies that they're being fed, then they would realize that what they did was a really bad thing.
See, having been in the presence of humans who deliberately choose evil as a philosophical life path, I'm going to disagree with you on the idea that everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. But I really, really like your point of view, and I'm going to give it a lot more thought and meditation.
Are you saying
there are some people out there who are doing things specifically because they're evil, but then when you look at them, that's because they're psychotic or mentally ill.
See, that's the kind of answer I was hoping for. Okay, cool. Thank you.
But, a vast majority of people what I was trying to keep the topic focused on was regular people who are not psychotic or mentally ill, but are still doing bad things. Right. They believe what they're doing is for the greater good. They just simply either don't have empathy for their fellow man, or they are been fed a pile of lies in which they believe things that are true but are not true. Right. But because they believe this, they then act upon those beliefs.
So empathy is the answer. Fostering empathy. Would you agree?
I would agree. In fact, that's one of the things I find common with most people who tend to do bad things is that if you really look at them, they lack empathy for their fellow man.
Mm.
Because they look at it from themselves, like, I'm a victim, therefore I must strike back. But they don't think about, well, what about the other people who are also in my same predicament? Why don't we all unite together and work together to make everybody better? Not, oh, I got mine, and I don't want to give anything to you, or whatever things. Just makes it very selfish at the core.
They're hurting, so they want everyone to hurt.
That's another aspect.
See, that makes sense even from a neurological point of view. Primate brains are constructed in a certain way, and empathy, it does not come natural to lower primates. Great apes, yes, which humans are great apes, as we all know. But like, if anybody you observe, say for example, macaque behavior for 5 minutes, y'all will see what I'm talking about. But yeah, empathy does seem to be the answer.
Rebecca, this is something this is a question that I always pose to people because on this show, because of the idea that, I talk to so many people that believe that there are other organisms out in even in our solar system that regularly visit us and feed us information. That it's this notion that technology must come from something bigger than humans. But I want to say that you've been there and done that, and just plant a seed in our heads right now to how much work actually goes into what you did and what you do, because technology is huge, and there's a lot of people that don't work a 9-to-5 job, 40 hours a week, and then come home and sit and watch, reality shows at nighttime. I mean, they're working 24/7 almost, and they're hugely busy. They're very, very smart, and they're called human beings.
Well, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to crack a joke.
Sorry. Go ahead, Rebecca. Yeah, but I mean, there's people making superhuman efforts in technology, and this is where it's coming from.
Well, the thing is that the way I became the way I am is because I have an insatiable need to learn. I'm never satisfied with the knowledge that I possess. I want to learn something else. It's why I learned how to play a piano. It's learned how to later on compose music. It was how I was able to learn to draw, and then how to choreograph, how to write. The reason I even did Sailor Ranko the comic was because I had already mastered the art of writing a novel, because I'd written several of them already. But I wanted to write into a new medium, which is in this case a comic book. And I had friends in the comic book industry who then I asked questions, learned techniques and tips, and then I applied it to the Sailor Ranko comic book. And that was because I wasn't satisfied. And I learned how to fly a plane. I learned how to sharpshoot. I mean, I once had a 50 caliber gun, and I was able to target things 1,500 meters. I mean, it was a really expensive gun, and you should see the scope I had on that thing. But it was, again, it's back to, these are skills I possess. Heck, I speak 4 languages. And each one of them took time to do. None of these things I just mentioned was something I just picked up and mastered in a week. These are things that took 6 months to years to master. But it's because I wanted to learn and expand my horizons. And what I have found is that there are many people out there, a sizable minority people who, once they get to a certain level of education, have decided they know everything and then will actually stop learning.
Yes. Yes, that's very true.
I think that we have a couple of people out there on the planet right now who seemingly, to me, are buying brains. I mean, I would love to have my own spacecraft that I could just leave Earth with temporarily. However, I'll never do that or have time for that. But, what about using instead of using your talents to improve the planet, using your talents to make you look smarter? Is that happening? Not you.
Make me look smarter, as in how? I mean,
like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. I mean, they have billions of dollars and they could improve the human condition greatly, except it's not going in that direction.
Well, the issue really is you're looking at is the person narcissistic or not?
Yeah, there's that word.
And
I use that word a
I'm
lot.
not narcissistic. So as a result, I'm not going around bragging that I'm the best of anything and say I accomplished a bunch of things I never did or something like that. It's like, because I've got nothing to prove. I only
Yeah.
do this because I want to improve myself, but I have zero interest in doing it for bragging rights.
Right.
Sadly, there are people out there, especially some in the billionaire class, that are like, hey, I'm a bored billionaire. Why don't I fund my own space program? And then, bring William Shatner in there so Captain Kirk can actually be in space.
Yeah,
that's going to be something bragging rights for the rest of their lives.
I would, if I did build
I
my
would've.
own rocket, I would take William Shatner along.
Yeah, me too.
Say that, but
Oh yeah, but now there is an individual, Jeff Bezos, who now has the honest to goodness bragging rights at the dinner party to say, yeah, and I sent William Shatner into space.
Yeah. Well, those men are rich enough that they can afford to, purchase the services of, men and women who, and everyone in between, who aren't in it for the money, but their brains and their skills and their talents could honestly change the world. So Bezos can just, throw a bunch of money at one of these geniuses and say, hey, can you build me a rocket ship for William Shatner? And the genius will be like, wait, we're going to put William Shatner? Yes, I'll do it for $5.
Yeah. Well, there's that too. I mean, one of the nice side effects, still think it's a waste of money for sending rocket ships for tourists, but at least the nice side effect is that they've moved forward rocketry technology into the 21st century, something that NASA has not been able to have the funding to do, so that when NASA does, which they are working on a Mars probe, they're actually using technology from these billionaire space companies to take a technological leap that wouldn't have been applied otherwise. And for that, cool.
Yeah. Well, they're also using this opportunity to gather biological and radiation information about exiting the atmosphere. But no, sorry, I'm Aspergering. Sorry.
you're okay, buddy. So I think that I think obviously that has its place. Personal science and development, I love it. I love people doing their own experiments. I like to see more of that. But obviously, Rebecca, over your years, that the people you've worked with, you must have worked with some pretty impressive brains. And do you like where you see these personal experiments going? That like the people that you know in your circle?
Oh yeah. I have a friend of mine who's working on AI technology right now. I still tease him every now and then about he shouldn't be building Skynet, but
is his name Robert Fair by chance?
No.
Okay.
But the whole thing is that, one of my personal fears is that someone will invent an AI that, while it is not going to be a human being type AI, it's still going to be a form of intelligence that will develop the basic knowledge for life. And sadly, one of the basic rules of a living thing is the desire to survive. And if this AI isn't also given the ability to understand what other life is or have empathy, then you got Skynet.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Because it's going to be hell-bent on surviving at all costs. And in fact, what's interesting is I'm actually working on a comic called Cynthia 1, in which part of the story explores that very aspect.
I want to see it. When it's ready, let me know.
Yeah, that's cool.
Sorry, I just became a fan today. I'm still fangirling.
Well, the website's going to be Cynthia 1. It's with an S, and Cynthia.1 is the URL. She even has right now a Twitter account.
So aren't you glad that nerds sometime in our lifetime have become so cool? I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So you mentioned where you thought we would be politically in 25 years. What about technologically, Rebecca? Because I want to know, and are we going to meet or find out that there's something else out there living other than us? So what's that look like 25 to 50 years?
The issue is the fact that, first off, we have to deal with the great filter. Is it that the universe is filled with intelligent life, or is the filter such that we're like one of only a handful of intelligent species? Or the other thing is that we haven't hit the filter yet, which may be that we might self-destruct, and as such, we're the only ones left. Now, that aside, let's say, hypothetically, we do meet up with an interstellar race somewhere out there. Sadly, cosmic time is such that the race probably evolved into an intelligent species hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us. So it would be the equivalent of modern man walking up to a cave and seeing ugh and thrug going, rock, and a normal human. And that's how different we would be with them. So they're like, oh, there's a bunch of animals. Yeah, they built missiles and stuff, but we got, molecular transformation, replicators, and maybe they're even a unified mind, or maybe they're a synthetic life. Who the hell knows? Because we never met them. But they will be so far ahead of us technologically that we will look like cavemen to them. So therefore, we will be surviving at their pleasure. Because if they chose to, they could push a button and kill us all, and we couldn't fire a shot. We'd be gone. So if they take a liking to us and make us as pets or slaves or lunch or something, then yeah, they'll keep us around. Or they'll like, you know what, it costs so much money to fly to Earth that, hey, we come by, check out the place, take a few photos, get a postcard and go home. Who knows?
Wow.
But whatever we do, if they decide that they want to move in, we're kind of bummed.
Exactly. I mean, either way. I mean, if they come in peace or they do not come in peace, we still have the inability to really handle that. Cassidae Lightwing, you have a question? Let's make it one more question from you, sir, and one from Kristin, because we're about running out of time, and we've probably drained all of Rebecca's energy almost, because it's a long show. Go ahead.
So, politically speaking, I'm assuming that you're very, very pro equal rights for all races, POC, natives, indigenous, all that stuff. So, in the hypothetical situation of an alien race presenting themselves on Earth, and for whatever reason they want to play nice, do you think that politically speaking, that kind of diversity should be extended to beings that are not even of your same genetic clan?
Well, diversity as in, their thoughts and things. I mean, let's face it, anybody who comes in modern day with the ability to do interstellar travel, we have a lot to learn from them. But at the same time, we have art, music, science, and that we could share with them that's uniquely human.
Yes.
So, a technology exchange would be beneficial because we'd see what they consider art, what they consider music, so forth, and we would compare with each other.
Right.
And as long as that the species are compatible in the form they even look at the world, because how do we know that they even have eyes like we do to see in the same spectrum of color? Or do they see with sound? Like, are they creatures that use sonar to move around?
Right.
I mean, we have no idea what in the world an alien species would look like, talk, act, spell, whatever. So that's why I had to bring in if our species are even compatible.
Right. On a more personal level, say, for example, would you support an alien serving you eggs at Denny's?
Sure.
Only at Denny's, though.
Well, Denny's is special.
The Grand Slam.
I mean, let's put it this way. Within 5 years, a robot is going to be doing it for you. So why not an alien?
Cool. I like you.
Look what's happened at Walmart and your local grocery store in the last 365 days.
Yeah, I'm sure some of those people are aliens.
Well, I'm saying that, luckily we don't have to wait in line as much as we used to check out. However, I mean, some jobs were lost, so it's a different world. Kristin, do you have a question for my guest before she has to go?
Well, thank you. Because talking to somebody who has created such a rich and varied venue for all of us who are gaming fans, I just want to say thank you from everybody, because what you did was incredible, and we're grateful.
Well, thank you.
Can
And
I
I wanna-
change my
Read my
question to
comic
hers?
And I want to thank my amazing and compelling guest, Rebecca Heineman, so much for joining me. And Rebecca, if someone wants to discover your diversity and your artistry, how would they do that online?
Well, they can follow me on, basically use the word Burger Becky, BurgerBecky, on pretty much everything from YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and my website, burgerbecky.com. If they want to read my comic book, Sailor Ranko, it's SAILORRANKO.com. And it's currently 11 chapters. In fact, chapter 12 starts tomorrow. And it will be over almost 500 pages of manga in color. So I hope you like it. And there you go.
Awesome. We will love it. And I'm going to check it out because Cassidy's really piqued my curiosity, and I love the way you explain it, Cass. And I want to thank Cassidy and Kristin as well. So thank you all three for being here. Peace, love, and understanding. What's wrong with that? Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Love you guys.
All right.
That was a good show.
That was a good show. See, patience pays off.
Yeah. I spaz out too much?
You did. I knew you would.
I'm sorry.
Because you're the biggest nerd here, and that's why I'm glad you were here. So.
Well, thank you.